bop and beautiful. Skyballs and sax scrapers, sim 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 bop and beautiful. Skyballs and sax scrapers. Ooh papa, ooh papa, ooh papa, ooh papa. Fat sweaty bulldog stood in the sun. Stone village swamp man, slow motion run. Tender poke police sparker, precious birthday fudge. Swamp knife, bull man, walking undone. Me and Harpua couldn't care fewer. It happens all the time. We beat Weekapaug. Me and Harpua. We couldn't care fewer. It happens all the time. We beat Weekapaug. Hot liquor, stone jack, bitter toothless flesh, shabby pimple, chin slime, evil milky rash. Me and Harpua, spastic dead-eyed hound, using dreadlock skull cap. We're coming to your town.
We'll help you party down.
Me and Harpua, we couldn't care fewer. It happens all the time. We beat Weekapaug. Me and Harpua, we couldn't care fewer. It happens all the time. We beat Weekapaug. Welcome everyone and happy Thanksgiving. Hope you had a good one. I know I did. I'm going to tell you a little famous Thanksgiving story. Now, you probably know a lot of different Thanksgiving stories, but this particular story you may not know. You may know it. This is happened sometime around the 1600s, you know, somewhere in New England there. There was a boat that brought some people over, and they all landed somewhere around Plymouth Rock, and they started this little town. And in this town, there was all kinds of different people. But one of the things that really kind of started the future off on the wrong foot is that the people of this first town of America, there was one person in the town they didn't like, and they let everybody know it. They couldn't have a love for everyone in the town, so there was one person who was a little bit different, and because this person was different, they always gave him a hard time. Now, this person was a little bit older than the rest of them. He was sort of an old man. Let me give you a little background music here. He was an old guy, and he traveled around with his mangy little dog. And you know that the name of the song is Harpua. Well, the name of the dog was also Harpua. And this is the story of Harpua and his owner. Now, there they were in the town, and the townspeople didn't like either the dog or the old man very much, and they started to make it really obvious, and he started to feel a little bit more outcast and a little bit different than the rest of the people. And as time went on, he felt more uncomfortable, so he acted a little stranger. They saw him acting stranger. They thought he was even more different. They were more mean. And eventually it got to the point where he just couldn't live with the people anymore, and they forced him to move up into the mountains away from the rest of the town, forced him right out of the town, so he was lonely by himself and living up in the mountains. So he goes up in the mountains, and as he's living up there, every day he would look down at the people in the town, and he would get madder and madder. And he'd look down and he'd say, you know, people, you really piss me off. You tick me off. And he'd get madder and madder. But he never said anything about it, you know? He just kind of bottled all this anger up inside, but he kept getting madder and madder. And as the years went on, he'd look down there every day from his little cave dwelling up in the mountains, and he'd see them all having their happy little days down, walking from house to house. He'd get madder and madder. And one day he just couldn't take it anymore, so he opened up his mouth, and he looked down, and he just let out the biggest, most awful scream of all time. A scream that was so horrible that it shook the rafters of the town. towards the town. And the incredible thing was that he was so angry, and his anger was so deep, that people actually looked up into the mountains and they saw it wasn't just sound, it became sort of this beam of ugly red light coming out of his mouth. He opened up his mouth into a huge arc, and his mouth just a giant beam of light. And it came bursting down through the town, cutting down trees, leaving a swath of death and destruction behind it. The anger of ugly, horrible screaming sound. Knocking down buildings, knocking cars off, picking boats up out of the water and flipping them over. And it came bursting down through suburban streets until it came to the house of our friend Jimmy. That's right, Jimmy was in his house when the angry beam of vocal hatred came through, and Jimmy is the other person in the story. Jimmy was sitting on this particular day, and Jimmy was in his house, and he had no idea that the angry beam of ugly sound was coming towards his house, because he was too busy watching TV and listening to a little music, petting his cat, his pet cat that he loved so much. His house was filled with love, and he looked at his cat, and he pet the little cat, and he saw the cat, and he looked into its eyes, and he said, "You are nothing but love. When you open up your mouth, I see a beautiful green love beam coming out at me." And he pet the cat, and that's why.
Much like that love beam. Trey, someone's beaming love at you.
He would say, a green love beam coming out, hitting him, and he'd pet his cat. He'd look at the cat in the eye, and I said, "Ah, they're coming out everywhere. Beautiful green love beams." So he looked down and he said, "I love your beautiful green love beam, you handsome cat, you beautiful feline friend of mine, my sweet."
Beautiful red love beams as well.
Out of everywhere, he said, "I love that beautiful green love beam, and that's why I named you Poster Nutbag." Nutbag. Anyway, it was at this point in time that Poster Nutbag, standing in front of his door, suddenly the door was blasted open by the red beam of vocal hatred from the guy who had been at the beginning of the story. His door goes bursting off its hinges, smashing him in the chest, flying him back against the wall. Meanwhile, he loses Poster Nutbag, who he drops on the ground. Poster Nutbag runs out into the street. Gone, out into the street. Meanwhile, the old man's vocal scream was so incredibly intense that it had opened up a giant fissure in the earth, and Poster Nutbag stepped into the fissure and fell in the bottomless pit into the lava at the middle of the earth, disappearing forever. Jimmy, meanwhile, lying in the house, gets up, pushes the door off, and doesn't know what happened to Poster Nutbag when suddenly his father walks into the room. Look, the angry red vocal hate beam is gone. Jimmy?
Yes, Dad.
Jimmy, I have bad news.
What is it, Dad?
It's about your cat poster.
You mean poster nutbag?
Your cat died. Poster is dead. Poster is dead. Poster's so dead. How about a goldfish? I don't want a goldfish. I don't want a goldfish. How about I don't want a goldfish. I want a dog. There's a dog in the station with an odd mutation, and it needs lubrication each day. But the dog in the station, contemplating rotation as a form of recreation and play. A dog. There's a dog in the station with a bad reputation. It's a sign of the nation's decay. But the dog in the station doesn't need a vacation as the people rush by dressed in gray. A dog. The chairman of the boards.